Right, so I wanted to come on here and talk about the Makerfield by-election. I haven't done one of these political videos in a while, but I just wanted to sort of get my thoughts out while they're still fresh. It's a couple days after. It's Saturday, the 20th of June, 2026. So we're going to talk about how it all happened, why it happened, the situation for every party, and how it impacts them, and what's going to happen from here. So let's just start off talk about the winner. Labour. We'll start off with them, or more accurately, Andy Burnham. Andy Burnham won this, and he won with a majority. He won by more than the polls were suggesting, or even I suggested. I thought he'd get like 48%, and he got 54 or 55, 54%, I think. So it was a big mandate for him. He is very popular in that part of the world, and it was an anti-Starmer vote and it was a personal Andy Burnham vote, but it's not unconditional. They're voting for him on the basis that they want him to have real power in Parliament because they think he's going to be the Prime Minister, because people are a lot more astute politically now. I think part of why we have a multi-party system is because people are seeking out the parties rather than the parties seeking out the voters. So people are, very aware that like he's going to run for Prime Minister, wink wink nudge nudge. He didn't say it, but like everyone knows he's obviously, running to be Prime Minister, and they want him in there because they want him as Prime Minister. They want him to change the Labour Party. It's worth a try. And I think that's also, people naturally voting tactically. I think that's why they did, because it's sort of like a roll of the dice. Why not get Burnham in? So that's part of it, and he's popular in part because he's done a decent job, from what I could tell, as Mayor of Greater Manchester. And mayors are kind of in this unique position where they actually get to be national political figures without having loads of terrible headlines. They can cut the ribbon. They can sort of say, "Look what we're doing," but they're usually not maligned political figures. So a good example is like Boris Johnson as Mayor of London. And obviously he would go on to become Tory leader in summer 2019. And he did represent a change of direction with Brexit. And he basically saved the party. And he also had good vibes. And Andy Burnham, the comparison is exactly there for a leadership contest in the summer to take over a failing governing party that's polling at about 19%. So the question is, can he do it, and can he deliver what people want from it? Because at the moment, people are he's everything to everyone. He's the opposite of Starmer. People are projecting what they want onto him. Reform voters are projecting an image onto him. Leftists, at least left-wing voters, leftists online are a bit more mixed, like myself, but the average, Green voter sort of is projecting onto him that, they think he's going to be at least a bit different. And to be fair, I think he's probably going to be an improvement to some extent. So that's part of why Burnham won. His brand is really good there. It's the highest Labour vote in that seat. If we're going to talk about Labour, even though Labour was not on any of the campaign literature that they were putting out at all, it's the highest Labour vote in Makerfield, even though the seat was established in 2024. The equivalent seat, which is basically the same, the last time Labour got a vote close to that was 2017, where they got 60%, or something like that, which obviously Labour was led by the most unelectable person ever. So yeah, but anyway, all jokes aside, so that's obviously a major part of why Burnham won. It was kind of a best case scenario, and he could, basically distance himself from the National Party. The hard part is now. The hard part is not becoming Prime Minister. He's got that locked up. Who knows if something's going to happen this afternoon while I'm talking now. The easy part was getting into Parliament now, it seems. So he's got a task on his hands when he becomes Prime Minister. But the other reason, there were two other reasons he won. Well, there's kind of three, but we'll get to it. And we'll get to the other parties now. Which is Reform, Restore, and the left getting behind him in this instance. So we'll tackle all of those. Reform. This was a major target seat for Reform. They got 50% of the vote here in the local elections. Labour got 25%. The Greens were nowhere despite storming a lot of Manchester and Gorton and Denton. So it was not an area that the Greens were likely to win. And so it was going to be, given Burnham's popularity and people willing to at least give him the benefit of the doubt, it was going to be a fight between Reform and Labour. But Reform did not do themselves any favours. They picked Robert Kenyon, clearly modelling themselves after the failure of Gorton and Denton. They looked at the Greens and were like, they picked a plumber. Let's do that. Let's not go the Matt Goodwin route. Unfortunately for them, they picked a plumber who was not the sharpest plunger in the shed, but also he said some pretty terrible things in the past. Obviously, it's like an accident waiting to happen. All this stuff about him, all the stuff he said about women having abortions. He's a proud sexist, etc., etc. And when on the question time, I think that really damaged him. He looked like a deer in headlights. Like, they're like, "You've called yourself a sexist," and he's like, "Allegedly." What are you doing? And so that made Labour's job a lot easier. And there was a real gender divide in this election. And it's interesting that Reform's candidates that they've been picking, they're trying to cut through to a certain thing. For example, Runcorn and Helsby, Sarah Pochin, who's a bit thick, she obviously she's sort of there to like have a woman in Reform, like, to appeal to the whole protecting women and girls thing, which is very much undermined by Rob Kenyon's sort of old school sexist remarks, even if it's in the past and he doesn't believe it now. It massively damaged them, no question. And then, Matt Goodwin sort of had a more sharp, astute political candidate, even though he's an idiot, but he's a Southern GB News presenter and academic. And then they're like, okay, we need someone more local and working class, and they pick Rob Kenyon. But every time the candidate has a problem. So that's a problem for them. But the other problem for them, we'll get to Restore now, is they could not spend the campaign they were also saying stuff about Andy Burnham, like, oh, he's using it as a stepping stone to be Prime Minister. And it's like, yeah, that's what people want. That people want him to be Prime Minister, or at least give him a chance. What's the worst that can happen? They were trying to paint him as this like crazy radical, and it's like people don't believe that. Like, come on. But anyway, the other problem for Reform was that they couldn't put out this fucking hell, that dog is barking, it's pissing me off. They couldn't put out a mass message. Fuck off. They couldn't put out a mass message to appeal to the sort of 40-50% of Britain that maybe leans right, could maybe be persuaded to vote for a right-wing party. As previously, 2019 Boris Johnson got 45% of the vote, for example. But they couldn't do that because Restore, new party, the Vengeance Project by Rupert Lowe, was snapping at their heels the whole time. So they had to turn inwards and look at that 10% that could go Restore and be like, no, and give them a bit of red meat. If you look at the campaign when the Belfast attempted beheading and the riots afterwards and the Henry Novak murder, Farage really upped his game, particularly on the sort of like vice signalling to the right. And because he's not used to having a challenger to his right that can actually hurt him. He's used to it having like 1% of support. He's not used to the ultra far right, or at least on their rhetoric. I mean, I don't actually think they're that much more right-wing than Reform. Like, the Reform and Restore are closer than Reform and the Tories Tories have moved right since the general election that they lost. But the point is more a clash of personalities and trust. And Reform having to look inwards and go after this group means of potential Reform voters that are now considering Restore that would have previously been locked up for Reform, is that they can't look the other way and go after the sort of, I guess, more moderate Tory vote, or, get more women voters, which has obviously been a strategy they wanted to do. It clearly couldn't do it here. There was massive gender polarization because of Rob Kenyon, and so that was a really bad situation that they got themselves in, and yeah, it's I do wonder now, like, reform, are the wheels beginning to fall off reform? They've had, because this is the other thing, we'll get to it now, tactical voting. So the Greens didn't really run a campaign at all. They kind of let Burnham walk it, but they didn't run a candidate. And I think that was a smart move. You pick your battles, and I think the Greens can afford to sort of go out of the limelight for a few months, as they have done, and sort of let things roll out. Obviously, don't disappear, because there's going to be a Manchester mayoral vacancy now, and I hope the Greens, run a massive campaign in it. Maybe they can win. But if the Greens effectively paved the way to reform winning, we would never hear the end of it. So what they've done, in my view, is they've kind of called Burnham's bluff. They've been like, you want to be Prime Minister, we're going to let you be Prime Minister, because it's a win-win. Worst case is that he doesn't deliver on the stuff he wants, and the Greens go back up in the polls, which, I mean, they've dropped by like 1 point, and since the locals, and the Greens go back up and even higher, and can go back to saying, we want to replace Labour, they've betrayed us. On the other hand, if Andy Burnham is a great Prime Minister, well, then mission accomplished. We got a left-wing Prime Minister doing populist left economics, and great. So it's actually a win-win. So they made the right decision here, and people all voted tactically on the left to basically give Burnham a conditional mandate, and that's basically what's happened. But yeah, and as for reform, the cracks are starting to show. They only increased their vote by about 2 or 3 points compared to the general election. This was one of their high up target seats, and they really failed to probably galvanize support. Yes, they gained votes on an increased turnout, but it just wasn't enough for them. And it seems, with Caerphilly, these are all different types of seats that were reform targets. They're a microcosm of of parts of the country at large. Caerphilly, Welsh Parliament by-election, late last year. Then Gorton and Denton. So Caerphilly, Plaid won, and they outdid the polls. Gorton and Denton, Greens won, outdid the polls. Here, Andy Burnham beat reform, outdid the polls. All 3 times, the left option that was viable, that ran a strong campaign, was able to defeat reform. And so there was a real growing anti-reform vote in this country that's kind of been happening under everyone's noses. And that's something reform have got to reckon with, and the right have got to reckon with now, because, Rupert Lowe, Restore, they got 6.8% here. It's not a terrible result. I mean, percentage-wise, it's the same as the BNP. It's actually less than the BNP in 2010, but you could say for some reasons, maybe it's more impressive, whatever. I mean, some people say, they're a brand new party, but, Reform, when Farage first announced it as the Brexit party in 2019, cleaned up the European elections. And, you think your party was polling at 15% when it was first announced. Restore Britain was polling at 9% when it was first announced. Now it's on 4%. Kamala Harris was beating Trump in the polls when she first came in 2024, when Biden dropped out. Sometimes you get the most momentum at the beginning. And so the whole idea that we're only a few months old, or maybe this is your peak, who knows? Who knows if this is the start of momentum for Restore, or the beginning of a downward spiral. And I had this worry, and maybe this could still happen, that this could sort of push the Overton window to the right, while at the same time not really hurting Reform electorally. But it could have the opposite effect, where it hurts Reform electorally and makes Reform look even more insane, because they're having to move to the right to appease this smaller group of the population. So who knows? I mean, Restore have got to be the first party in history to have more activists doing get out the vote than actual voters. it's not a perfect silky smooth operation, and both parties have got problems. The Lib Dems were obviously a non-factor in this. Lib Dems don't do anything in Northern England, but now we get to an interesting variable. The Tories, they are done here in Gorton and Denton, and here, and you look at the local elections in Wales. You look at the local elections in places like this when Reform did do well, and the Tories are nowhere. They lose their deposit. And it's really crazy. They're literally dying out. So they're not completely dead as a political party, and I don't think they will be dead as a political party. But they are spent as a national party. It's not coming back. The days of getting 40% of the vote are over for the Tories. So, for example, in Aberdeen, where they were able to sort of galvanise a specific local vote on local issues, on basically being anti-net zero and pro-drilling in the North Sea. The irony being, in government they actually did net zero, which was good. They did a good thing, and now they've gone back on it because they're so scared of reform. So there's the thing with the Tories is it's like a lost dog aimlessly trying to find its owner, just following behind 3 months behind Reform. Like, Reform will announce a policy and the Tories will be 3 months behind. And it's just kind of sad to watch, but it's not sad at all because they have no one left. And if Labour don't sort it out, they are a hyper-local party going the way of the Lib Dems now. If you look at the result in Aberdeen, they have little pockets of the country, same way of the Lib Dems. But the thing is, this is Labour's last roll of the dice with Andy Burnham, because things have gotten so bad in this country that Labour didn't have to wait 14 years to decline. They came in and went down the same trajectory because they got on the ship right as it was going down, and they haven't really made an attempt to properly recognise the ship is sinking. As not to sound like Wes Streeting when he did that, ship shape analogy in the 2024 election. So this is really Labour's last chance. Everyone knows it. It's Labour's last roll of the dice. The question is, can they, make it work? Is there going to be success? Otherwise, they're going to go the way of the Tories, and we probably will have a Reform government. So, yeah. I wouldn't extrapolate too much about Reform here because of the Burnham factor, but it is a problem for that, and the Robert Kenyon factor, and maybe Restore will fizzle out, kind of, but they do have a problem now. Reform, sorry, Jesus Christ. They do have a problem with this, and if I was in Farage's position, maybe I'd be worrying that I peaked too early. People used to say, Reform, they're not going to win the next election. And I was like, I think they are. Like, stop burying your head in the sand. But now, there's a fly. Now, they could actually not win the next election. Who knows? And so, we'll have to see what happens. That fucking dog is pissing me off. Sorry. We'll have to see what happens. But at the moment, Labour have a chance here to do a bit of a reset, to signal a big change in direction, and to kind of, unite a chunk of the country behind them and give people faith in politics again. I'm not sure if I have that much faith in Andy Burnham, who is basically the de facto next Prime Minister now, but we will have to wait and see. So, hope you enjoyed. Like, subscribe, and etc. Do all the other stuff, share it. No editing. I kind of just wanted to get this all off my chest. I didn't even have notes. I just went through it, and I'm really glad that I did. So I'll see you in the next one. Maybe I'll do more of these because it kind of felt good to just get off my chest. So hope you enjoyed, and see you in the next one. Goodbye.